What's up guys, Anfield here, welcome back to a new video. So for today's video we're going to be doing a top 5 tier 10 heavy tank list. I already did the medium tanks at tier 10, so you guys seem to enjoy that. So this time we're going to be doing the heavy tanks. Now as with the last video, they're all going to be based on their pubbing capacity in terms of how well they go into public battles and how well they do there, as well as also their clan war viability, which is also an important aspect in the game. So those are the two things they're going to be measured against, and I did hear your feedback and a lot of you weren't really too happy that the 907 was top as a clan war reward tank, and so this is going to be tech tree tanks only, no clan war reward tanks, although I never specified in the last video that it would ever be tech tree tanks only because I wanted to include all of the tier 10 mediums that were in the game. That does include the 121B, the M60 and the T22 were they to make the cut, as well as the 907, however they didn't. But in this case we're just going to do tech tree tanks. That's okay, and it's actually easier because honestly the fail low and the 260, I'm not sure if there are any others I'm missing, wouldn't really make my list anyway. Maybe they make yours, I don't know. But this is going to be tech tree only. So just for clarity, I said I'm going to be using public battles and clan wars to weigh these tanks against each other. That also includes esports, which is sort of included in the competitive play that I'm going to sort of lump in with clan wars. But public battles is going to be the heavy weight here due to the fact that the majority will play public battles, not everyone will play clan wars. And also I don't have exactly recent experience in clan wars, although I do have a general idea. It's not exactly fresh experience. So for that case, we're going to be more heavily favoring public battles. So without further ado, let's get into the list. Coming in our 5th spot, we have the T110E5, the tier 10 American heavy tank, alongside its T57 counterpart, which is the autoloader. The T110E5 is a very versatile tank, and it's kind of like a jack of all trades. It plays almost like a medium in some cases, but is very heavily frontally armored. Now its armor was nerfed a little bit in a recent patch. It was buffed significantly when they made the tank HD, making its really difficult to penetrate. A lot of people did complain for a while how good the tank really had become, so they did nerf it kind of recently. They nerfed the hatch armor and also the side armor, which did affect the tank. The hatch is now easier to pen, although still kind of bouncy, but the same really can't be said for that side armor, which is very thin and doesn't really allow the tank to side scrape effectively, which is kind of an important feature in a lot of cases. But the fact that it can play on the hills does make up for it. It's very good at that. It has very good gun depression, and obviously the turn armor is very good. Now the hatch does let it down there in some cases, but the hatch is still quite bouncy, and because the tank has pretty good gun handling as well as just a good general gun, it is able to get up, get it shot off quickly and pull back down. So it's not the end of the world, and because of that it does allow it to be quite effective in those kind of situations, which is pretty critical on a lot of these maps that wargaming have. Without the recent nerfs to the armor, particularly the hatch, it probably actually would have gotten a higher placing on this list, but it's still a very good tank, and I still had to debate with myself a little bit what position it really deserved, but I ended up with the 5th spot. So it's still a very good tank, but I think its usage in clan wars has dropped quite dramatically, but it's still very solid in public battles. And in our 4th spot we have the FE215B, the tier 10 British heavy tank, and unfortunately we don't have the chieftain yet. Why wargaming? Anyway, the FE215B is an absolutely superb vehicle because of one key feature: its gun, which when talking about tanks is an important feature to get right, and the FE215B gets it right. 400 alpha, but incredible DPM, and it's also amazing gun handling. It's sort of like the E5 gun in many cases, but just improved. So if you're used to the E5 gun, this gun is better. Now it does have the drawback of not having the E5's frontal armor, but it also has more hit points, and the armor in the FE215B, while not great, and because the armor layout is silly, it can't really side scrape, but it does actually play on hills surprisingly well. It's got more gun depression than a rear mounted turret probably should have, but it's very good actually on hills as long as they're not too incredibly steep. It does play quite well in this case, and the armor itself does hold up against some tanks. It seems a little random, to be honest with you, especially when it comes to the hatch armor, because the turn armor is actually really quite good, although the mantlet does have a weak point, which is really dumb, but it does hold up pretty well and will bounce you some shots, so it's not the end of the world. But really it comes down to the fact that the tank is so good at dishing out damage. It is so reliable, and when it comes to reliability of guns, I cannot stress how important it is. Especially the better you get, it becomes a fantastic asset to have a reliable gun, especially when it has high DPM like the FE215B has. Now it does mean that it's quite a high skill cap tank. It's not for everyone, it's very difficult to use, but if you can master this tank, it is so good. But like the E5 before, it doesn't really get that much Clan War usage these days, which is kind of a shame, but it's just the way Clan Wars works. But in a public battle, I definitely recommend this tank. So coming in at number 3, we have the 113 or 113, which is actually a tank I don't really enjoy all that much personally, but I can appreciate that the tank is very good. That's in both public battles and, unlike in the previous two, Clan Wars as well. So the 113 is basically a sort of IS-7-ish type tank, except unlike the IS-7, it's actually better in terms of maneuverability. The IS-7 is sluggish, it turns very poorly, and in a straight line it's okay, but mostly it picks up most of its speed going downhill, which isn't really that useful. But the 113 is almost like the 121. It's very, very quick, so it's much more useful. It can flex around a lot faster. The armor is very good, the side armor is very good, the turret armor is very good. So you're getting I'm sure you're seeing a pattern begin to form there. But the tank also has more alpha than the previous two tanks listed, which is actually a very important thing to have, because a lot of cases World of Tanks isn't about let me just shoot at this guy and he'll shoot back at me and I'll win because I have better DPM. A lot of times it's just, let's trade shots. This guy is making a cross, I'll shoot him once. This guy is making a bad poke, let me shoot him once. And in most cases, you can't punish more than once regardless of how fast your DPM is, unless you get a permatrack. You don't really get to actually punish the tank, whereas if you have a lot of alpha, you can punish that tank with one single hit, which is why having high alpha is actually really, really useful. And the tank does have good DPM too. So ultimately, the combination of good maneuverability, solid armor, and pretty good alpha as well as DPM, the 113 is a very good choice for both public battles and for Clan Wars. It's a relatively straightforward tank to use, and it just does its job quite well. The gun handling isn't great on the tank, but it's manageable, especially since you're not really going to be doing that much sniping with the tank. You're going to be in someone's face most of the time, and so as a result, the gun handling won't let you down too much. It is going to let you down a little bit. It's not quite FV215B by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still better than some tanks, and is a manageable aspect of the tank when you get so many strong features already. Coming in at number 2, we have my most favorite tank in this entire game, the AMX-50B, the tier 10 French autoloading heavy tank. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would have expected this tank to be on the list, and here it is. It's an incredibly fun tank, and also an incredibly powerful tank in both Clan Wars and in public battles. This tank is a heavy feature. It is by far the best tier 10 autoloading heavy tank in the game against the D57 and the Kranwagen. 57 does have better DPM, but it actually doesn't have the ability to deliver that DPM as effectively. One, because its gun handling is so poor, and two, because it can't flex around the map and deliver that DPM. So two big issues with that tank. The Kranwagen just has a 3-second interclip reload and the longest overall reload, so it's not even worth mentioning in that case. If it was unnerfed, we'd be maybe talking about something completely different. But in this case, the 50B is a much better tank and can even supplement its own damage by ramming, which is not really something the other two tanks can ever claim to do. And while the other two tanks have heat, the 50B has APCR, very high pen APCR with very high velocity, allowing the 50B to deliver that damage very effectively. Of course, it does have the drawback with the armor. The turret is absolute cheese, but the frontal armor is actually very, very good and incredibly bouncy, so you can actually bait people into shooting it, but it's really mostly used for the ability to ram other people, so you can't really rely on the armor, but it does have a great deal of speed, allowing it to get away from danger, so it's not the end of the world. And while you can't rely on the turret armor to do any bouncing for you, you can rely on it to have a great deal of gun depression. 10 degrees, which is huge, allowing you to play on hills quite well. So as long as you're coming over to clip distracted enemies or enemies that are currently engaged with your allies, you can come over, deal out 1600 damage and pull back to safety very quickly. So this is a huge feature as well. So overall, the tank has a combination of incredible speed, firepower, reliable gun, as well as the fact that it has great gun depression to play on hills as well. And you can bank on seeing quite a few of these tanks at the Global Grand Finals in Moscow this year. So at the number 1 spot, we used to have a tank that was irrelevant for a very long period, but now has been so overbuffed because Wargaming can't do anything in moderation that it's the most overpowered tank in the entire game, and that is the Mouse. Now, the Mouse basically has everything except for speed going for it now. It has the most incredible armor in the entire game, which is actually effective against bouncing all premium shells as well as standard ammunition. Its frontal armor and side armor is absolutely ridiculous. It can't even be tracked for damage really these days, except for the most high caliber TDs. It also received huge gun buffs to the DPM and the reload speed. The reload speed was cut by 2 seconds. It means now that this 490 alpha tank has more DPM than a 400 alpha T110E5, as well as the gun handling to match. Now, it's true that it does have lower penetration on its AP rounds, although it's still manageable. You can just use the APCR as much as you want because, let's be honest, in a clan war situation, you definitely would be. In a public battle situation, why not use the better round? Everyone's going to be shooting you with premium anyway. Fire back. We don't live in a world where no one shoots premium rounds, and so as a result, you can't really use the lack of AP penetration, which is okay, but, generally less. As a real balancing metric with this tank, the gun is going to pen with its APCR no problem. So if incredible armor, meaning that it's very, very, very difficult to penetrate every single shot against this tank, wasn't already enough, as well as the fact that it could out DPM you in a lot of cases, it also has 3,200 hit points, which is a huge amount to chew through. And that's if you pen every shot. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And due to recent changes brought with 9.18, the tank has only become even more powerful. The results of which, basically, you either have to play against a bunch of tier 10s, which is fine because you do really well and you can farm a lot of damage with a high ammo capacity as well as good DPM. But also, if you're against tier 8s, good luck to those tier 8s because rip them. Also, with the artillery changes, the artillery is not going to hit you for nearly as much as it used to. You can put a super heavy spall liner over a vertical stabilizer because it actually doesn't need one due to the fact that the turret turns so slow and the gun handling is so good anyway. You can actually dump it for a super heavy spall liner, meaning artillery does basically no damage to you. It may stun you, fine, but you're not really going to take much damage, so it's not the end of the world. So literally the only downside the tank currently has is its speed. Now, don't get me wrong, the tank did need buffs, but Wargaming just doesn't seem to do buffs or nerfs in moderation. They seem to overdo it regardless. So I do worry actually when they do go to nerf this tank that they overdo it again, when all it really needs is to be tweaked in one capacity, not in every single capacity. So I'm kind of surprised, to be honest with you, they didn't just give it rockets because, yeah. But either way, this tank is easily deserving of the #1 spot on this list. It is so good. I already said that the 50B would feature quite often in the Global Grand Finals. Well, this tank will feature even more often in the Global Grand Finals. That's how strong this tank actually is. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what would have been on your list, whether you agree or disagree with me. Remember, this is all my opinion, so ultimately you can have a completely different opinion, and that's perfectly fine. Just let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll catch you on the next video.